Hello, welcome to the Wildline Podcast. I'm your host, Dan. This is a new podcast about movies, specifically how much a movie makes at the box office. I have been a box office nerd for about 20 years now. I'm definitely an amateur. I've never worked in the industry, but I like to call myself an amateur expert, if that actually exists. In all reality, I'm just super nerdy about the box office and really passionate about it, and that's why I started this podcast, to talk about it and connect with other people who are into this very wonky, nerdy thing, following the box office week in and week out. And so I already posted an episode this week about what happened last weekend at the box office. So this later episode here, we're going to talk about what's going to happen tomorrow and the rest of the weekend with the new movies coming out at the box office. We're going to make some predictions. And I was really excited about this weekend. Sometimes you'll have a couple of big movies open doing wide releases. But this weekend we got 4. And I'm really sort of stoked to talk about and try and figure out what these movies are going to do and make some hopefully accurate predictions. My predictions from last week were terrible. The Accountant ended up doing a lot more than I thought it would. I predicted it 13.5 million. It did 24, I think. I look it up. And my Kevin Hart prediction was about 4 million off. I think I predicted it would do 7 million last weekend, and it did about 11. So hopefully I'm going to do a little bit better this weekend. So the first big movie that is opening, it's going to be the widest release, is Jack Reacher Never Go Back. So this is the Tom Cruise action thriller that is a sequel to the original Jack Reacher, which I'm trying to figure out when. It felt like that movie came out a lot more recent than it actually did. So the original Jack Reacher came out in 2012 during the holiday season. It opened up at about $15.2 million, which is okay. But it ended up with a total domestic take of over 80. And so this is one of those weird things about the box office, is that when the holidays roll around, you have to throw out a lot of your rules. So I remember in the last couple episodes, I've talked about multipliers, right? Like how much a movie makes in its opening weekend, and its multiplier is then times that equals its domestic total take. So usually it's going to be about 3x. So in a normal season, if Jack Reacher, the original, opened at 15, you would expect it to do about $45 million, 3x that opening weekend, right? But because this movie opened up on a holiday back in 2012, it ended up having kind of an outrageous multiplier. So it ended up doing 80 million on an opening of about $15 million. So the multiplier in this case was over 5x, which is huge, but somewhat, I wouldn't say fairly typical, but it makes sense when a movie opens during the holiday. The first weekend it made $15 million. The second weekend it came in at $13 million. So it only dropped about 10% from its first weekend to its second weekend. Normally a movie is going to drop about 40 to 50% on its second weekend. So for Jack Reacher, the original, people seem to like it, and it stuck around for a while and had a really good multiplier. And I believe the cinema score on Jack Reacher was an A-. So the people that went to go see it the first couple of days enjoyed it. They liked it, and that sort of enthusiasm for the film carried it to its 5x multiplier, which is great. Now, the sequel here, its reviews have been not great, actually. And that will affect... it's hard to say if it's going to affect the opening couple of days of the movie. It definitely will affect the legs of the movie. So when people talk about the critical reaction to a film and the word of mouth to a film, what that is most likely to affect is the multiplier of the legs of the film. So it may open big, and the perfect example of this in the last year or so was Batman versus Superman, which opened up pretty well. People were expecting maybe over 200, but it did pretty well in the, I think it was the 160s, and but it just fell off the face of the earth after that. And so that's what happens when a movie does not have a good reception, either from critics or from the audience or from both. And Jack Reacher is really getting raked over the coals by the critics. It now stands at a 38% in Rotten Tomatoes. That is terrible. Like, that is not even, oh, there's some mixed feelings. It's basically like people hated this film from a critical perspective. So that, I think, will definitely affect its legs. It might affect the opening weekend a little bit. See, things have changed a lot in this whole game, right? 5 years ago, if a movie was reviewed poorly, it probably would not have affected the opening weekend that much. But because of the way people communicate nowadays, any bad reviews are sort of collected immediately when they're released. They're thrown up on Rotten Tomatoes, and people are aware of them is the moment they hit. And then it's basically regurgitated over social media over and over and over again. Oh man, this movie looks terrible, right? And so there is a phenomenon going on. I would say it started probably about a year ago, maybe a little bit more, where not only is the critical reception starting to affect the opening weekend a little bit more, but in a really crazy way, word of mouth is starting to affect opening weekends. So that the people that see the movie on Thursday and Friday post on social media what they think about the film, and that starts to affect the Saturday, Sunday take for a movie. Now, I wish there was a study done on this, and maybe if I get a chance, I'll do it. But so the quality of the quality of films nowadays is more important than it ever was before, just because of the hyper-connected nature of how we communicate. And so I'm really interested to see if the Jack Reacher sequel, Never Go Back, is going to sort of tank in the Saturday, Sunday sort of slot because people don't really like it. Now, we don't know what people think about it. We know what critics think about it, but we don't know what the public thinks. And this seems like it could be one of these movies that's going to get a pass from the audiences because you're going in. We know we love Tom Cruise. Like we were weirded out by Tom Cruise for a while because of the whole Katie Holmes thing and the jumping on the couch. That was a long time ago now. Geez. And the whole South Park episode and all that kind of stuff. But I think there's something about him, and I've seen him on a couple of late shows this week. He is just the epitome of like the perfect sort of movie star. He's always smiling. He's always in a good mood. He always puts other people in a good mood. And he's always game to sort of like screw around on these shows. So he seems decently down to earth. You got the whole Scientology thing. And believe me, when I saw that documentary Going Clear, I almost fell out of my chair when Tom Cruise is saluting the portrait of Ron L. Hubbard, whatever the hell his name is, the founder of Scientology. So there's a lot of weird stuff going on with Tom Cruise, but I think he's made a comeback, not only with Jack Reacher back in 2012, which is, 4 years ago, crazy, but also I think more than anything, his work in Edge of Tomorrow, which was a film that was expected to be a blockbuster, fizzled at the box office, but I think found a second life on VOD and HBO. People have really warmed up to that film after they sort of gave it a chance. I don't think a lot of people gave it a chance because it just seemed like the trailer looked terrible. They're like, what is this? I caught it on HBO and I was like, I have no idea what this movie is, but I'm already fascinated within the first 5 minutes. And have since probably seen it like 5-6 times, maybe more on HBO. It has a very interesting sort of feel to it. And Tom Cruise is honestly phenomenal in that film. One of the better action movies of the last 10 years. So I think Tom Cruise has made a comeback here, and he's now back where he was before. He's like this big movie star who everybody just loves. So if we're looking at trying to predict what Jack Reacher, the sequel, is going to do this weekend, there's a couple of ways you can look at it, right? So the first thing you're going to do is we're lucky because we have a history of data here. We have the original film, which came out 4 years ago. We talked about it a little bit, opened up at 15, ended up at 80. That's a good starting point. So I think, okay, like that's what audiences originally felt about it. The hard part there is that the original Jack Reacher felt really new to people. Now, I think it's based on a book. I might be wrong about that, but I think it's based on a book. So there was a built-in audience. But for a lot of people, it was a whole new idea. I remember when those trailers were running, I was like, I don't get this. What is this? It seems like a generic action movie. But enough people went and enjoyed it that it did pretty well. So that's our starting point. So we say like $15 million opening, $80 million to end its domestic run. Now, the one thing to remember is, how many theaters is this sequel going to be opening on versus the original? The original opened up on 3,352 theaters, and its per theater average was $4,538, and that's how you get that 15 million total take for that opening weekend. Now, I already stated that the holiday season is different. The original Jack Reacher opened up essentially during the Christmas week. So it was basically deflated a bit, its opening, because people tend to go to movies throughout the holiday season from Christmas all the way through New Year's. It's a super, super popular time to go see movies during the week even, right? So that $15 million opening was pretty deflated. So I can't really use that as much as a guide as to how well this is going to do. Now, another thing to note here is that, the sequel is getting released in a pretty super busy weekend, I would say. We've got 3 other major releases coming out. So we got the Ouija sequel, Ouija Origin of Evil, which is the sequel to the 2014 horror movie. That's opening up on about 3,200 theaters. We got Keeping Up with the Joneses, which is the Zach Galifianakis comedy, which is opening up at 3,000 theaters. And then we got the Tyler Perry Boo, a Madea Halloween, opening up at about 2,300 theaters. So it's a very crowded weekend. So that's going to deflate, I think, a little bit out of Jack Reacher. Now, what's fascinating is what you really want to do is kind of compare the genre of Jack Reacher and the vibe of Jack Reacher to the other films. It doesn't seem like it matches up audience-wise and demographic-wise with any of these other films necessarily. The only one I could really see is Keeping Up with the Joneses, which is actually also spy-related, but it's more of a comedy. So I think it's just going to take away, it's not going to be like direct competition. It'll sort of take away little slices of the potential audience for Jack Reacher. So what I usually do here is, because I have a data point of the original movie, I'm thinking, okay, so the reviews for the sequel are pretty terrible overall, but do I think the audience is going to respond to those reviews? Are they going to go in thinking it's just a dumb action movie and sort of have a good time with it? Audiences seem to like the original. My gut says that it's just not going to do as well. Not only because of the crowded weekend, but I do think the low quality of the film will affect it. The original Jack Reacher was in the 60s, if I recall, on Rotten Tomatoes. So it definitely seemed like it was a better quality film. So I'm going to say, here's how I'm going to start it out. I'm going to be like, I think it's going to do less domestic than the original. I think it's going to do about 60. Now, what I can do then is back out of that a little bit and be like, okay, if it's going to do 60 and it's got a multiplier of around 3-ish, because that's what an average movie does that has an average sort of quality to it, then you're going to start out with about a $20 million weekend this weekend as a prediction. And that seems about right to me. And how I'm going to check this actually, so let's start out with $20 million. And let's back out what the per theater average would be then. So $20 million divided by the number of theaters that Jack Reacher is going to open up on this weekend, which is actually a high amount. It's 3,780. And so that gives us a per screen average of $5,291. And we compare that to the original, which was at $4,500 essentially. So you're talking about almost like a little bit under $1,000 more in my prediction on its per theater average. I don't know how the fact that the original opened on a holiday really screws up our predictions because it's just like an odd sort of time to open up with the numbers. It doesn't really fit a lot of the patterns that you would see throughout the year. I'm fairly confident though with these numbers. I think it's gonna do about $20 million, and it's just gonna sort of fizzle out. It's not gonna have the five x multiplier of the original. Absolutely not. I think it's gonna fizzle out. So I'm gonna predict an even $20 million opening for Jack Reacher, Never Go Back. And I think it's going to end around $60 million, with a per theater average this weekend of about $5,300. Okay, so we got the big one out of the way here. So let's move on to Ouija: Origin of Evil. So that's the horror sequel to the original Ouija movie, which came out in October of 2014, so a couple of years ago, right around the same weekend. This is a pure horror play. They got lucky, the studio, with Blair Witch really underperforming in September. I had high hopes for that movie because remember, it was called The Woods. It was sort of produced in secret as the Blair Witch sequel, and nobody knew that. And they got all this like hype from a film festival. I can't remember which one, because it was called The Woods, and people didn't know that it was related at all to Blair Witch. So that's how I first heard about it. And so when it got revealed that it was actually a sequel, there's even more hype about it. I was like, oh man, people are gonna go see this, absolutely. And actually went to go see it the opening night because I'm a huge Blair Witch fan, the original at least, of course, not the ridiculous sequel, Book of Shadows. And it just really petered out, and it's still I cannot figure out why it did so poorly. I think it had something to do with, I don't know, this. I was looking at the MPAA's report for 2015 on just movie going in general, who goes to movies, who spends the most money, and the most like per capita group of people who go to movie and spend money is the 12 to 17 age group, which I don't think is that surprising. It was surprising in how much more it was than older people, like over 40 and stuff like that. But teenagers spend a ton of money at movies, and I think the downfall of the Blair Witch sequel was that like younger people just didn't maybe remember the original and didn't connect with it at all. For people in their mid 30s like me, it was just like, oh hell yeah, I'd love Blair Witch. Like I totally want to see this sequel. Was it good? It was all right. But the whole point of this is that during the Halloween season, there is a horse race for who's going to take that horror movie money. People want to be scared in September and October, and whoever sort of can convince people that they're the scary movie to go to is gonna make a lot of money. Like there's guaranteed money, tens of millions of dollars in this if they can sort of be the one to market themselves successfully. Blair Witch failed. It totally failed. And it was going to be a horse race between the Rings sequel. I guess it's Ring 3, but it was called Rings. The trailer that dropped like 2 months ago, and it looked like a train wreck. It looked like a direct to video. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know if that exists anymore. Like direct to VOD, really trashy movie. And I think the studio balked at it and decided to move it to next year. So that left the Ouija sequel all to itself. And so I think that it's going to do quite well. And I've actually invested heavily in the film on the Hollywood Stock Exchange, which is the fantasy stock market for movies. If you're interested at all in learning more about the box office and how much movies make and sort of playing a game related to that, Hollywood Stock Exchange is the place to do it. And so I invested all of my money, or not all of my money. I maxed out my number of shares on Ouija, the sequel, probably over the summer, because it just it's a given. If they're opening a major studio horror film in October and there's not a ton of competition, it's just gonna make money. And it was not priced very highly throughout the year, and I think because people just didn't like the original. Like the original Ouija movie that came out in 2014, I thought was really poor. It reminded me of that movie back in the mid 90s, right after Scream came out, there were all these slasher knockoffs that were trying to copy Scream's super ironic style. And it reminded me, the Ouija movie reminded me of Urban Legend, if any of you guys remember that. I think that came out like 98 or something like that. Just like not well done, totally a cash grab, super poorly written, made no sense. And so I think that left a bad taste in people's mouth. And I'm looking up the cinema score on the original Ouija now. Oh, yeah. Like, I was right on the money with my interpretation of the quality of that film. The cinema score for the original Ouija was C. And with cinema score, a C is essentially an F. Anything below a B is a failing grade. So it's super skewed upward. Usually, again, it's like they're measuring the people that went to go see it on opening night, essentially. So the people who went to go see Ouija on the opening night gave it a C. That means they absolutely fucking hated it. And so I think there's just a bad taste in people's mouth for the sequel. But like I said before, the other factors, there's no other horror films opening up now. It is 2 weeks before Halloween. So it is just, and like the weather's cooled down significantly in the Midwest, and it's starting to cool down here in the Southeast where I am. So fall's in the air. People got that chill. They want to go get scared at a movie. And so I think people are going to go see this. Now, if we're looking at like where to start pricing Ouija the sequel in terms of what we're thinking it's going to do opening weekend, right now it's priced on Hollywood Stock Exchange, and that's a really good place to get a consensus on what people are thinking in and outside the industry about what a movie is going to do on opening weekend. Right now it's priced at $41 a share. That basically means you divide that by 2.7 because that's the typical multiplier for a film. The stock market, the Hollywood Stock Exchange, is essentially pricing it at when it's going to delist in about 4 weeks. So how much it's totally going to make in 4 weeks. So you just divide the actual stock price by 2.7 to give you what it's going to do opening weekend, or what it's predicted to do opening weekend. They're saying $15 million opening weekend. You know, normally I would say it's going to be higher than that. But because the original did so poorly in terms of quality, I don't know. It seems like it might just fizzle a bit. And remember the original did 19 million its opening weekend, and it ended up with $50 million, and it opened up on October 24th. So right in that sweet spot, you know, right? In that case, it was essentially a week before Halloween. This is going to open up tomorrow on the 21st, so it's got a couple extra days to make cash before the Halloween hits, and then it's All Saints Day, and people forget about being scared. So that multiplier did 50 million total domestic, the original Ouija. Divide that by 19 will give us our multiplier. It did a 2.6 multiplier, which is all right. With a horror film opening up in October, once November 1st hits, that audience is going to drop off like a rock. So that sort of makes sense to me, like a 2.6. I was thinking it might even be lower because the cinema score was a C. So if we take a look at it, the consensus is $15 million now. The majority of the audiences who saw the original didn't probably like it all that much, so it's going to be a depressed sort of opening weekend to some degree. It's not going to do 19 million. There's no way it's going to do 19 million. I might have to sell my Hollywood Stock Exchange stock. I think I misread this one a little bit originally when I was looking at it. I was thinking like Halloween movies sometimes do like $30 million opening weekend just because they get that cash grab during the season. So let's just assume Hollywood Stock Exchange is probably pretty close, and they're going to do about 15 million for the opening weekend of Ouija 2, or Origin of Evil. Now, the only one thing I would add about this is the trailer's fantastic for this. I believe it takes place in 1965 Los Angeles, so it's sort of a period horror piece a la The Conjuring. Both The Conjurings, I think, are period pieces, horror period pieces. And and also Annabelle, which I really enjoyed. It was so like cheap, but I really enjoyed that, and it was a really cool 1960s setting. So this is sort of playing off that, going to the past and sort of creating a cool replication of the 60s, in this case Los Angeles. So I think it's going to be better than the original in terms of quality, but the problem is, do people know that going into tomorrow and tonight? Do they sort of look at the trailer? Did they see the trailer? Does it intrigue them enough to go see it? I don't know. I got my doubts. I really got my doubts. People do not forget paying $15 for a movie and having it suck. So I think it's just going to be really weighed down by the poor quality of the original. So right now it's projected at about 15 million. I kind of want to see what Box Office Mojo. That's where I get a lot of my data from. So if you're super interested in finding out all these numbers and where I get them from, just go to Box Office Mojo. They're looking at. They're also noting the poor quality of original and how it might not do well. They're saying $16 million for Ouija Origin of Evil. I'm gonna kind of go on their side a little bit and say 16, and what I'm gonna do is back out what the per theater average would be. That's sort of my bellwether to sort of gut checking some numbers. So $16 million is the projection. It's going to open on 3,168 screens. So let's back that out and see what we get for an average here. Of course, every time I use this calculator on my PC, it always flips out on me. I mean, you think of all the things that you could get wrong on a computer, like a calculator should be like the least of your worries as an engineer, but they just fuck it up every time. So that's a per theater average of 5,000. And so what the hell does that mean? $5,000. $5,000 is a fairly decent opening sort of weekend average. Now, if we compare that to the original had $7,000. So that makes sense to me. That makes sense to me that because the quality of the original was so poor, the sequel is just not going to do as well. Normally, sequels do better on opening weekends just because the only reason they're making a sequel is because the people liked the first one, and so they want to get more money, and so there's usually a lot of hype on that first weekend. So sequels, and for the most case, usually do better on their opening weekend than the original. I think this is going to be the exception, and I'm going to say that it probably does, let's say 4,500 for its per theater average. And so that will actually give us about $14.3 million. That's going to be my prediction for Ouija Origin of Evil. $14.3 million. Okay, so we got two more to go through. And so let's take a look at the third biggest opener of this weekend in terms of theaters, which is going to be Keeping Up with the Joneses. This is the sort of spy movie with really good trailers. I've seen really great responses to this trailer. I think that they've done a fantastic job on the marketing end of things. This is Zach Galifianakis, John Hamm, Isla Fisher, and Wonder Woman, whatever her name is. So it's like a spy comedy. The quality looks pretty good. It's just a really hard sell, I think. It's PG-13, so they're gonna get the teenagers and stuff like that and families. Although it didn't seem like a very family movie when in the previews. It seemed a little bit raunchy. It's getting distributed by Fox, so it's got a big marketing arm to push it. It's been pushed constantly. But I feel like it's going to get lost a bit. I just don't see it really popping off that well. And so I'm going to start it out at, I feel like it's just Price is Right or something. I'm going to start out at $3,200 as the per theater average. And that's just me sort of guesstimating based on what movies normally do. This is on the lower end of an okay opening. And it's opening at 3,000 theaters essentially, or if you want to be exact, 3,022 theaters. So it's looking at about $9.6 million. That feels right to me. That feels right on the money, actually. Um, I don't. There's no reason to think that this movie is going to overperform, right? So overperforming, I think, would be in like the 6,000 range or 5,000 range as a per theater average. Let's just pop that in there real quick and see what we would get. So 5,000 per theater average at about 3,000 theaters. We're gonna get $15 million. Not gonna happen. I'm betting my entire amateur career at box office that it's not gonna do 15 million. I could be totally wrong. But I'm gonna say about $9.6 million for the weekend. This one's really hard to pick, so I could be way off, but I just don't feel like it's gonna pop off that much. It's gonna have like a $3,000 in that range per theater average and end up about 9.6 million, maybe 9.2 million, somewhere in that range. So that sort of gives us that one. And the last movie that's opening up, and probably one of the harder ones to predict as well, is the new Tyler Perry Halloween movie, Boo, Madea Halloween. I have no idea how to price this, to be honest with you. What I'm going to do is, we'll take a look at what Tyler Perry's past movies have done and sort of get an idea of that. So the last movie Tyler Perry put out, part of his whole series, was Tyler Perry's The Single Moms Club, which came out in March of 2014, so a couple of years ago in some. That opened up at $8 million, ended up at only 15. Oh my God, that's terrible. Oh, how is that even possible? I guess that was that for when's Mother's? I don't even know. That must have been around a holiday. St. Patrick's Day? I don't even know what's going on. The one before that was Tyler Perry's Madea Christmas. Oh yeah, so this is part of the Madea series. I should probably look closer at that. That opened up at $16 million and ended up with 52 total. That's a decent take. Medea's Witness Protection. That was June 2012. That opened up at 25 million. I don't remember these being so big. I'm just so out of the loop, I think, sometimes. Opened up at 25 and ended up with 65 million total domestic. And Medea's Big Happy Family opened up also at 25, ended up with 53. So I feel like he really, really just threw these movies out there. The highest opening ever for one of these was, it looks like $41 million for Madea Goes to Jail back in February of 2009. I don't think this new one has any place being close to that. I feel like it's going to be on the lower end of these estimates. I'm thinking probably mid to low teens. I mean, if his last one, which came out 2 years ago, and again, I guess it wasn't a Madea film, only did 8 million. This again also has the holiday bump. It's a Halloween movie. It's coming out a couple weeks before Halloween, so you're gonna get an extra bump there. But Tyler Perry's movies are targeted at African Americans. It is specifically targeted at that demographic, 100%. So there's a set audience for it, so it's gonna go to see the movies no matter what. We also had the Kevin Hart movie come out last week, which was targeted at African Americans. So I feel like that Kevin Hart movie is going to take the crunch out of a little bit of this Tyler Perry movie, just because most people don't go to the movies more than a few times a year. That's just the reality. I was looking over the numbers the other day, and it was just like, yeah, there's a lot of people that go. The average person only goes about 4 or 5 times a year. So I feel like the Kevin Hart movie might take a bite out of that demo for Tyler Perry. I kind of want to get a consensus on this one because I'm a little bit lost, to be honest with you. So let's take a look at what HSX, Hollywood Stock Exchange, has listed for Tyler Perry. It has it a $47 share price. So to get the opening weekend, again, I'm just going to divide that by 2.7. And that's going to give us a $17.4 million opening weekend for Tyler Perry's a Madea Halloween. That feels high to me. That just feels high. It's actually starting to drop on Hollywood Stock Exchange as well. So I think other people are agreeing with me that this seems like a little bit overvalued. Wow, Keeping Up with the Joneses is super depressed price. It's at $19 a share. Man, maybe my prediction's way too high on that. Oh, well, I'm sticking with it. Mid 9 million for Keeping Up with the Joneses. For Tyler Perry, let's back out what Hollywood Stock Exchange is saying. So let's just say they're at $17 million, right? And so what I'm going to do is just take a look at how many theaters it's going to open on. And again, this is a wide release. It's over 2,000 theaters, but it's not a super wide release. It's not over 3,000 theaters, and it's not close to 4,000 like the Jack Reacher movie. So when you have a situation like this, the potential earnings of this movie are going to be sort of cut off, right? If it opens in less, it's basic arithmetic. If it opens in less theaters, it can't make as much money. But you'd be surprised when people are predicting the box office, they don't take into account the number of theaters. It's incredibly important. So it's only opening on 2,260 theaters. So if we take our $17 million prediction and divide that by 2,260 screens, our per theater average is going to come in at $7,500 about. Now, the question is, does that make sense? That seems like a high multiplier. A high per theater average. That just doesn't seem to jive with how I'm seeing this movie open. Let me just take a look at some of his past movies. So his last movie opened with a $4,300 average. So I think I might be in the right here thinking that this is not going to do as well. Although his Madea Christmas opened up at with a $7,300 average. So that's closer to what they're predicting, or what the consensus is on how it's going to do. I kind of want to take a look at one more here. Tyler Madea's Witness Protection, which I've never even heard of. It came out in June 2012. That did an $11,000 per theater average, but that was also a summer film. So, man, a little bit rough. I just don't think it's going to do very well. I think it's going to do about a 6,000 maybe, high 6,000, high fives maybe. That seems a little bit more appropriate. So let's take a look at that. Let's say it does 5,900 per screen average at about 2,300 screens. You're looking at 13.3 million. That feels about right, actually. That feels right on the money. I'm sticking with that. I just don't think it's going to pop off and do 7K per theater. It's opening up on a similar amount of theaters that his movies normally open up on, but it just doesn't seem like it has any buzz to it whatsoever. And his brand has definitely sort of dropped off a bit. He was great in Gone Girl, by the way. Back to the Gone Girl discussion. He was so good in Gone Girl. He's a great actor. In any event, I'm gonna say about 13.3 million for Boo and Madea Halloween, and that will round us out here. So with Keeping Up the Joneses, I said mid nines. I feel a little bit weird about that, just because I feel like it's pretty high, and HSX has it opening at something ridiculously low. They have it opening up at 7. Okay, so it's not that far. I think it's going to do a little bit more than that, about 9.2, 9.6, 9.5 million, somewhere in that realm. And with Jack Reacher, we're looking at about $20 million opening. And with Ouija, how do I feel about this? I don't know. The HSX has it at 15. I think it's going to be a little bit lower than that, just because the first movie was so bad. So I expect a little bit low teens for Ouija, the sequel. That's sort of it. It's been a little bit longer episode than I would have wanted, just because there's 4 movies opening up. I want to try and keep these to about 30 minutes. I'm probably at like an hour or something. In any event, thanks guys for listening. I really enjoy talking about this stuff. I got a new website up, thewildlinepodcast.com. It was available. So shoot me a message there. I got a little message thing that you can reach out to me on. I just want to connect with people who are super into this stuff and talk about it. And I will start having guests on. I know you probably are annoyed by me just talking for 30 minutes straight, 40 minutes straight with nobody else here. I could honestly talk for 6 hours straight about this, but I know that some people don't want to listen to that. So I'll start adding in some guests, either from people from the box office subreddit. If you're interested in being on the podcast and talking about some movie stuff, reach out to me either on Reddit or on the website, and I'll probably get some other people involved as well. Thanks for listening, guys. I will be back Sunday or Monday. We'll see how it goes, to talk about how we did in our predictions for this weekend. Thanks. Have a good one.